In this episode, Dr. Glenn and I are going to talk about 5 signs that you've built your relationship around trauma. Another way that we refer to this is an attachment relationship, right?
Yeah, and oftentimes people think that they're not in it, but they are. Mm-hmm. So this will hopefully shed some light and open people's eyes on this topic.
Yeah, it's incredibly common to build your relationships around trauma because it kind of, unusually, it just feels right in a very soulful sort of way. And so it leads us down this path where we don't even realize what we're doing. And a lot of our clients are in this boat. And we ourselves have done it too, right? Like my first marriage was completely, and I would also use the term trauma bonded, although that has a different term. Mm-hmm. That's kind of used a few different ways in psychology, right?
It's identified more with like a straight up abuse, but it has a looser delineation in terms of how you can use it. But yeah, it's more identified. Yeah.
Colloquially, we kind of use it to say like you've built your relationship around trauma, but you're right that usually trauma bonding, and from a psychological standpoint, is like you've bonded with your abuser. But anyway, let's get into this. We're going to start with an introduction. Welcome to 12-Week Relationships. This is your place for better relationships in weeks, not years. And when we say relationships, we mean all of them, starting with yourself and working on out. I have to say, this is actually our last episode. Well, we're aiming for it to be our last episode that's filmed on our very first set. This is our first and most basic set just against this wall. And your lovely wife has built us out a beautiful set right next door, like literally like 10 feet that way.
I know, I'm really excited. Thank you, honey. Thank you, Aki. Shout out to Aki.
I'm stoked. So we're going to finish this episode, and then going forward, you're going to start seeing us on the new set, which is, I don't know, it looks really cool. Looks like a home that we built here in the studio.
Yeah, it's very homely. The vibe is very nice.
Yeah. Before we get into today's episode, I do want to also mention that if you guys are looking for one-on-one coaching or group coaching, we have a lot of people right now on the wait list, and we are going to be launching the online group coaching soon for individuals. This will be a great way to get into the program because I believe your one-on-one list is booked out
until August.
Yeah, until like Q4 basically.
Yeah.
We don't have space on that, but we will have group coaching available soon, which will allow us to serve a lot more people and give you all a great experience. We've been working on that program a lot over the past year. Over the past 6 months, we've been hitting it hard, which is why we've slowed down a little bit on the podcast and social and whatnot. But you can join the waitlist at 12weekrelationships.com, and we'll send out a notification as soon as it's available to sign up for. With that, let's dive into our topic, 5 signs that you've built your relationship around trauma. Number 1 is that you act dramatically different within your relationship than you do outside of it.
Yeah, and people say this a lot, the common theme, especially like, people that are very successful. They're like, I'm successful in my work. I'm confident. I feel good about myself. I'm direct. In my friendship circles, I have really good friends. There's independence and there's a give and take. But when it comes to relationships, and then they'll slouch, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I feel so helpless. I feel like I can't make any decisions, and I don't understand the contrast. And then you could see it through their body language during the sessions, because they'll be really confident about anything else besides relationships. And then once they're in relationships, it's the complete opposite.
Yeah. And what they specifically mean is that one type of relationship, right? Love. Like they're talking about that. Whether it's a girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, whatever it might be, it's that relationship that kind of not only befuddles them, it has them they're just a different person.
Yeah, and this is the thing. People assume like that shouldn't happen, but it does, because the more intimate you get, like that's a really personal relationship. It's going to trigger your wounds. Mm-hmm. And so, part of our program is identifying your core values, and then also being accountable for the wounds that come out, and making sure you don't make decisions based off of that.
Yeah, I have a very personal experience with this one because I've been through it. I would say my first marriage was literally just a trauma bonded marriage, or I should say a marriage built around my trauma. And almost for the entire 14-year duration, I was a different person among my friends, at work, than I was at home. At home, I didn't feel comfortable to make the same jokes, to be the same person. I wasn't nearly as confident, but in every one of those other arenas, I was fine. When I'd get home, and it was funny because when I'd bring I almost got to a place where, well, not almost, I got to a place very quickly where I didn't feel comfortable bringing my spouse to spend time with my friends, with people that I cared about, because I found that I didn't feel like I could be myself. I was constantly worried about her and her reactions and how she would perceive something and every one of those things. So while I was in it, I didn't even recognize this until the very, very end. And the funny thing was that it always is interesting to me just how blind we can be to this stuff, even knowing it, because during the entire time I was studying psychology from college all the way up through to now, 20 years, I was studying all this. And yet I couldn't recognize it for myself. Or maybe I could, I was just refusing to acknowledge it.
Well, this is the biggest mistake I think people make. And you can tell me if this happened with you, is people like, you're in that helpless state at home, like when you're with your ex-wife,
Mm-hmm.
and then people assume that's the real me.
Yeah.
That's the vulnerable me that I'm not showing to the world. So all those other successes that I'm doing, that's fake. Right? But this vulnerability that I feel, and then you're more identified with your pain automatically and assuming that everything else that you do outside is discredited.
What's funny is if you're with someone that's manipulative and aware, they can actually play that against you as well.
Yeah.
Like they can say to you, no, this is who you are. Who you are at home, this is your safe space. This is, and it was funny. I had a very real experience with when I was going through the process of making this decision to divorce, and it was about a year where I was just kind of like doing all the things that I needed to do to make sure that I was ready for this. It's funny, we were attempting counseling. That was the first time that she was willing to go to counseling. So at the point where I said I'm done, that's when she was like, okay, I'll go. I had been doing coaching and counseling and things since the kind of beginning of that. But I remember during this process that during that counseling process, I came up to Justin, my best friend, and I was like, you know what I've realized? And this is before kind of getting to this place where we're at in our framework and all this stuff. This is like 6 years ago. I go, you know what I realized? The person that I am at work, in front of the camera, when I'm at parties, when I'm with friends, that's me. The person that I am at home, that's the fake one. Because even he had believed that, like, the person you are at home, that's who you are. And all this other stuff is the persona.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. It was the opposite way around. And so that was a very unusual realization that, like, I'm not myself when I'm around my ex.
And that's breaking the trauma, is not identifying with the trauma and seeing yourself in the healthier context. This is just a wound that's coming out and I just need to work on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a totally different space.
Okay, number 2. The dynamics of the relationship mimics that of a parent to child. I have experience with that one too. All right, go.
Yeah, so basically instead of, especially it'll start usually within the consult. Whereas like one of the partners will be like, look, it's like bringing the kid to the principal's office. Look, fix him, make the changes, or fix him or her, make changes. And as long as they just make these changes, we're on the same page, right? And then they talk to me like, see, it's you and I are good. We just got to fix this one person. It's like a parent-child conference, right?
Yeah.
And that's the approach. So that starts from the consult. And then once again, like during the conversations, like when there's conflict and there's all this confusion, like you're not being there for me or you're not doing this, it takes this role like you need to do A, B, C, and D. And then the other person is like, okay, I'm trying to do that. And it's just the power dynamic is not healthy at all.
Side note, I think it'd be fun to hear. What do you say as the therapist when they say that to you? When they're like, I'm here because you and I are on the same page. We just need to fix that one right there.
So then it goes, usually what ends up happening is I'll be like, why are you acting like a parent? And I go, why are you acting like a child? And I go, why is this dynamic happening? And I go, how old are you guys? And then they'll say their age and I go, and then there's a lot of like pausing, or they'll be like, I'm not doing that. And I go, you're telling him what to do like he's a child. I go, you're slouching like a child. I just call it out. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of pausing.
So you're very direct about it.
I'm very direct about it.
Yeah.
I sometimes they'll get upset and I go, you guys are paying me to do this. Mm-hmm. So if this is part of the process.
Yeah.
And I go, you can disagree, but let's have a healthy conversation about it. So it's calling everything out. It's trying to resolve things, and it's pointing it out, because a lot of times they're not awake. It's not their fault. Like they're not purposely trying to do it, but they're just not aware of like, can you see this person is slouching? Can you see this person is looking at you like this? Mm-hmm. And can you see your anger as you're talking down on your spouse right now? Can you see that? And then it's just like, oh, okay. And this is what a trauma wound is.
Yeah, that one's interesting. I found that was also a trait and characteristic of my relationship with my ex. I played the role of the father, and basically she was the daughter from the very beginning. And I also found that, and that sounds kind of creepy because what's really strange about that dynamic is it's creepy to say it that way because you're obviously having sex with your wife, but to think of that kind of a relationship in that process, it very much destroys the actual sexual intimacy between the two, because I remember beginning to kind of build this sort of fatherly attachment as well, where it's like, I don't want to be intimate with you. I don't want that from you because I don't perceive us to be equals per se. It's that father-daughter relationship. And that's also one of the big things that kind of, as we talked about, this person that I was at home is different from the person I was outside. It's almost identical to the way that I'm with my children. I'm not as funny with my children. I'm not playful. I mean, I'm playful with them on their level, but I don't make jokes and I don't like just let loose. And I don't do the things that I would do with my friends because these are my children, right? And that was very much who I was at home. Outside of I had to constantly worry about these adult temper tantrums from my ex, where you do something wrong and then you're given you're being stonewalled for a week, 2 weeks. It's that kind of, which I feel like everybody knows stonewalling, but I do feel like, Chinese wives, they have mastered this art.
It's a different level.
It's a different level of stonewalling.
There's mastery in this game.
Yeah. There's, if all the other countries have maybe other ones have mastery level 2, but they were black belts at stonewalling. And her mom was incredible at it too. Like, anytime you upset somebody, then we could go 2 weeks, we can go a month without saying a word. And it wouldn't be me. I was like, it would go back to almost like trying to appease your daughter. Like, oh, honey, what did I do wrong? What did I do? That kind of approach again.
Yeah. Like a 16-year-old teenage daughter slamming the door. Why aren't you doing this? What can we do to get this done? It's not two adults having a conversation, trying to figure stuff out.
Now, this is the crazy part, is that when we say that we've built these relationships around trauma, we might be thinking, well, how? What about that seems like it's normal, seems like it's healthy? Because from a healthy and outside perspective, you look at it and just go, no, that's bad. That's unhealthy. But what we're saying is that oftentimes in these, relationships built around trauma and these attachment relationships, you'll feel like it's soulful. You'll feel like this is the one, like this is my soulmate, that this is the way that it should be. The feeling is coming from your past trauma. It mirrors, the relationship is mirroring something that you've already experienced. So the best way to put it is that maybe it feels incredibly familiar.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing that people, I think, misunderstand about attachment. The whole point of trying to raise a healthy kid is that when they get older, like any person, when you're confronted with challenges in your life, you go back to what you know, right? So the whole point is, if you raise a healthy kid, they don't have to, even if they don't think about it, they're just going to go back to what they know. So if what they know is healthy, they're going to make healthy choices.
Yeah.
However, most people don't have that option. It's not the healthiest choice. So you're going to make decisions based on what you know in the past. And it's just resolving that and taking ownership of that.
Yeah. So for me, this relationship that I had with my new wife at the time, this is 20 years ago, it mirrored what I had seen. That's what I had seen in my father's relationships with, my stepmother, as well as his past relationships. And so it felt like that's the way that it should be. This is what a healthy relationship looks like. It felt completely normal, except it wasn't.
No, agreed. And one of the things about this is it's an evolution, right? So like for me personally, like, we're going to get into like the attachment styles, but I was kind of like, I had to take care of things and be the parent, but also be the kid. So it's very chaotic and disorganized. So one of the consequences of that is I always feel like I have to rescue people. So I'd be in these rescuing relationships, always be their therapist, always listen to what they have to say. But then I would continuously make those choices eventually, but then there would be like a healthy person and there's healthier points. So along this journey, in your relationship journey, it's just taking ownership for it, where you are in the process, and continuing to choose the healthier options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. The third sign that you've built your relationship around trauma is basically that it mirrors attachment styles, right?
Yeah, so there's basically 4 attachment styles. So once again, attachment is based off of structure, healthy structure, and your ability to be an independent person, expressing your feelings, getting to express who you are. So that is a secure attachment.
Yeah.
Healthy boundaries, there's independence, and there's a give and take, and a structure that promotes growth.
Sorry, I should have said it mirrors unhealthy attachment styles. What you just described, the healthy.
Yeah, because there's 4.
Yeah.
And then the other 3. So then there's the people pleaser attachment style, which is basically following rules. It's very rigid. You know, your independence is sacrificed because it's too many rule following and you have to sacrifice and not feel.
Mm-hmm.
Or it gets very enmeshed. Everyone's in groupthink and they're just following, doing everything as a group. So the consequence of that is you feel like you need approval all the time and you're always seeking approval and doing behaviors based on approval.
Yeah. Specifically on the people pleasing, I would say that was the attachment that I fell into, in terms of like, that was the archetype for our relationship, where one person who has the more anxious attachment, they're more like kind of always sort of feeling the sense of anxiety that things might end, that things might, the shoe might drop, that it might go, the other person might get upset, whatever it might be, that they're going to leave, that there's this constant insecurity, and you take on the role of this pleasing of the other person. And the other person, in my case, was an avoidant person. So whenever there's conflict, whenever there's issues, they step away, and it pushes the pleaser to kind of fall into it even deeper. Like, oh my gosh, what do I got to do? It's literally the definition of, when I think of happy wife, happy life, I think that is the colloquial phrase that defines an anxious to an avoidant type relationship, where one person is constantly anxious and trying to please the person that is avoiding.
Yeah. And then the other person's like, yeah, please me, make me happy. That's your
course.
job. It's me, 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 me. Because they're in that self-preservationist mentality.
Especially if they're lacking self-awareness or somewhere on the spectrum of narcissistic.
No, agreed. And that leads to the other attachment, which is the disorganized attachment. And more as we're doing this, and even in my life, a lot of people have like very, there's degrees of trauma, but if it's very chaotic, you have to parent the parent, but they want you to follow rules and everything doesn't make sense. That leads you to either 2 things. One, you want to rescue people in relationships, or you yourself want to be rescued, right? So then once again, I'm doing everything for everyone. I put everything aside. I'll sacrifice everything in my life that's good to help you no matter what. Or on the flip side, there's an expectation that you need to drop everything in your life for me, and I'm going to take everything from you, and that's cool.
Yeah. And the crazy part about this is that when we talk about how it mirrors these past relationships, oftentimes these relationships and this sort of attachment relationship is generational, and we don't even know that we're handing it down. Like, you look at let's say that we were looking at I'm going to look at a particular case study. This woman's father was very religious, grew up, in a Christian environment, and he always preached happy wife, happy life. This was his philosophy, right? And he literally set this dynamic from the start that he would do anything to please his wife. I mean, every time he would give church talks and lectures, he would talk about how he, tries to be a better husband and is always trying to please his wife. And, and what you could see from a psychological standpoint within that relationship between he and his wife was that he was anxious, constantly fearful of being alone, being left, insecure, all that kind of stuff. And she was classically avoidant. If anything didn't go her way, she stepped away from things, left the house, whatever it was, she would stonewall, all of it. But the way that they would wrap it up into this pretty package is happy wife, happy life. So unconsciously, they ended up teaching both their daughters that, okay, it's the husband's job to make you happy. Both of them enter relationships with people-pleasing husbands. And both of them now rely on their husbands to make them happy. And they find it unusual that their husbands can't make them happy. There's not ever enough that they can do. And there's always something more to criticize. And both have very difficult relationships with their spouses because of this. Now, if the cycle continues and they just stay, I mean, their parents have been married for 30, 40 years in this cycle. I wouldn't say that he's happy. I would say that he's built, her father. I would say that he's built this belief system that is supporting that this is what he should be doing. This is what a man's life means. So he's not happy, but he's doing what he thinks is his responsibility. She, meanwhile, is totally fine.
So the daughters are cool too? I mean, they're getting their needs met in the least.
Well, the interesting part is that their parents are traditional Chinese. The daughters have both married Caucasian men and Asian American men, which to me is going to be there's going to be a wake-up call somewhere in there where it's like, I don't think they're going to stay around for the rest of their lives type thing, if that makes sense.
Like they're going to wake up and say, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like this is it. I mean, they hopefully in that scenario, both of them would wake up and that, they'd want to grow and be happy together. Mm-hmm. But ideally, probably not.
Yeah, it's going to be, but they have, it's just interesting how unwittingly they've handed this down to the children, and it becomes this generational cycle.
Oh, you're right.
Where they're going to repeat the process again.
Over and over.
And they might fix it. I hope they fix it. They're already in, counseling and coaching, and so they're already working towards it. But if they don't, it's a matter of if they have, one of them has children, the other one doesn't yet. Let's say they stay together, then they hand it down to another generation.
It's going to be passed on again. Yeah.
If they don't stay together, maybe they figure it out and get it resolved, whatnot. You know what I mean?
It's a multi-generational transmission.
Yes.
Yeah. And, the concept of nature versus nurture, it's both. That's what the term epigenetics.
Mm-hmm.
So you can always change your genes and everything you're passing on to your kids. So there's a huge responsibility when you're raising them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for each of them, it feels so natural when they find these when they're dating, having this person to please them and doing those things for them. It mirrors what they know.
Yeah, going back to what they know. And I remember because there's the concept of psychology, like intimacy in like a heterosexual relationship is making the woman feel like the most important person in the world, in exchange the man feeling like the most respected. And in that dynamic, you were like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Who would want to do that? So if it's the dynamic, but if you have that attachment style, you'd be like, yes, of course that's what you want to do.
It is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I mean, I've heard some pretty stupid things when it comes to.
Yeah. But that's up there.
That's up there.
Yeah, I'm sure, man. Yeah.
Okay. Fourth sign that you are in an attachment relationship or a relationship built around trauma is that you tend to, it's a repeating pattern, right? You tend to keep choosing these toxic relationships.
And then the attachment patterns complement. So you have the three basic attachment complements. So the people pleaser with the narcissistic person, the self-preservationist, I'll do, I need your approval, and the other person keeps taking. The other one is a disorganized attachment with the narcissist. So then they'll sacrifice everything for the narcissist, overextend themselves, or they'll be with the people pleaser who then they're expecting everything to be done for them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's that complement of pain. Unresolved wounds is that complement.
Yeah. You also find this, the most typical, I feel like the very typical way that we hear this colloquially be described is, why do I always choose people that are bad for me? Why do I keep making the same mistake? Why do I keep, it's that same thing. Like maybe it's the motorcycle guy who you just, the tatted up motorcycle guy that you find hot and you've dated 5 of them. Why do I keep choosing the bad guy? Mm-hmm. It's literally because of your trauma. Yeah. You're choosing this person because it mirrors something that you've experienced, and so it's familiar to you.
Yeah, or you're seeking something that you didn't get. So like if you're a daddy's girl, and then there's like the bad boy, and then he's kind of disciplining you. Ooh, this guy's exciting.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I don't know, this guy's, oh my God, this is great, because now that structure is in place, even though it's too extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it comes out in all these different forms.
Yeah.
That's why girls like the bad boys, like that stereotype. Yeah. Because there's a sense of structure and discipline.
Yeah. Or if your father was a disciplinarian.
Yeah.
And this is the other strange and oddly, I don't know how to describe it other than any way that it's just sort of strange, but we often develop our sexual fetishes around the trauma that we experienced in our childhood from our parents, from people around us, all that kind of stuff. So it's often that ends up influencing. So if you had a disciplinarian as a father, you might take on a very submissive role sexually and be very much attracted to the person that's going to, put you in your place and kind of not only sexually, but then also just on a regular everyday basis, right? And funnily enough, when you do have a healthy relationship, when you stumble across the one that actually would make for a good partner, you would often dismiss it because it feels boring. It doesn't have that chemical,
Correct.
feeling there. It's not that rush.
Yeah, and that lets you know that you're choosing based off of trauma.
Yeah.
So I had like one client a while ago. So she's very successful. Her dad was not around growing up. He was like a playboy. She saw pictures of him, never really met him. So she was always attracted to these like wealthy business people that was, he was dating 2 or 3 different people at the time, and she would constantly chase these people versus choosing someone that would complement her lifestyle more. And then she finally woke up, and got to the point where she was like, when that urge to like go back to this partner, to, one person was like playing all these games, and when she was like, I want to go back, and she had to wake up and remember, I'm choosing my daddy. Like literally say, this is a daddy. I'm literally chasing my daddy. And it was like, psh, okay, that's it. I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And if you wake up and recognize like, this is gross, like I'm chasing my daddy or my mommy, that's kind of gross.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, that's like a wake up call. Oh, I'm chasing because I want my daddy or my mom. Oh, you just got to wake up. So,
okay. Moving on to number 5, the last sign that you might be, and there could obviously be, there are other signs and whatnot. We're just talking about the very common ones. But another common one is basically having little emotional control or little intellectual control over your emotions when you're within the relationship.
Yeah. So if you have intellectual control, you're able to see things in a broader perspective. You're not reacting to your feelings. But people that are in their trauma, like, this is no joke. Like, I've heard some pretty ridiculous things. So some of the examples, one person, and I kind of changed it up, but they're like, I have herpes. I'm in a toxic relationship. I sacrifice.
Wait, go back to the herpes thing. What was the premise of that? What was
that? My partner gave me herpes.
Oh.
The person I'm with, I know it's a toxic relationship. I know that I sacrificed my job and time.
Oh, this is one person saying.
Yeah, to end the session.
Yeah.
I know that this is not good for me, but I'm not going to leave. And they said it with so much conviction. I'm not going to leave.
That's wild.
And it's like, okay. And, if you go into their attachment history, they grew up in a very disorganized home, right? So making that connection, but it's like, no, I don't care. There's no intellectual capacity. I'm staying. And we're going to work this out no matter what.
Yeah, that's actually quite common, right? Because growing up in a disorganized home, you might have parents who would say things like, it's ride or die. Like, we're family for life.
Yeah.
Like, you don't abandon your family for any. So you latch on to the sayings, and that becomes part of like your identity. Family for life. We are together. This is ride or die. You attach yourself to that, and then just learn to recognize that all of the chaos, all of the hateful things that are done to each other, that's just normal, and it's ride or die. And then you take that into your adult relationships.
Yeah. And while you're in it though, like, you're not even hearing what you're saying though. This is the thing. They're not really hearing what they're saying.
Yeah.
That shows you that there's no intellectual capacity. I have herpes. I've lost my job. I've lost my friends, but we're going to make this work no matter what. It's the right thing to do. Yeah. And I'm not kidding. It's like, okay. And I go, you don't think this has anything to do with your past at all? No, this is it.
Yeah.
This is right. And there's so much conviction in it.
This can often manifest itself in another way too, which we could go into some more case studies, but I'm gonna talk of one of my personal experiences. So after I had divorced, one of the very first people that I had dated, I said, we can casually date and whatnot, but I'm not looking for anything. I can't get into another relationship right now, and if you're cool with that, then cool, but otherwise let's just stay friends. And this person had openly like said, I'm good with that. Like, I'm in the same place and I don't want a relationship, right? But within 2 weeks, it was like there was a sense of love kind of forming, and I'm sure I probably did certain things that maybe put off the wrong vibe, that maybe put off like a I don't know, maybe I led her on. I don't know but she actually came to me and said within 2 weeks, I can't recognize myself. I'm getting angry for things that I would never normally get angry at. And I don't know what it is. Like, this is not who I am. And that's when I said, you know what, let's just go back to, being friends. This is, I'm not ready to be doing this. You're not ready to be doing this. And we stopped, right? But it was a conscious recognition of like, I don't normally get upset by this kind of stuff. I don't get upset when there would be things where I would just answer a phone call and she'd be like, is that your side piece? I'm like, that's not who I am. I don't have what? Like, that's not me. And she goes, this isn't me either. I'm not a jealous person, but I feel jealous right now.
Yeah.
And I go, just because I said, I'm not looking for anything serious doesn't mean I'm like, going out and doing things and whatnot. But I go, that's unusual anyway, because this was just supposed to be us dating and having fun. So it became this, like, she couldn't control that aspect of it. And that's when I immediately went, this isn't going to be healthy for, either of us. And oftentimes it has to be one person that kind of like stops it, because it's, I don't know, it's a train that feels really good to be on, like the rush of a new relationship and dating and that kind of stuff. It feels great.
Yeah. The positive chemicals come out, but you also bring up a really good point. You guys are friends and this was never an issue.
It was never an issue while we were friends.
And then once it kind of moved, even though you said like it's casual, but you're getting more intimate.
Yeah.
Then all those wounds come out, and that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing if you find yourself kind of behaving in a way that is very out of the norm. Like, you can't control these emotions that you normally never have an issue with. Then there's some trauma behind that.
Yeah. And once again, it's a lack of intellectual control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's it. Did we cover all of them?
I think so. Oh, and then the other comment that was put there is this was another direct quote, but it's a generalization. But I know this relationship is toxic, it's borderline abusive, but if it's wrong, I don't want to be right.
These extremes are never I don't know, man. When you grasp onto these absolutes, it's never a good thing. One of the reasons why I want to do a video on this specifically, because religion to me is both, it could have been something so beautiful, but instead it's very disappointing to me. And it's disappointing because religion had this opportunity to be this thing that brought everybody together, a community that respects each other, that learns to grow and sees flaws in themselves and just wants to improve and help each other to improve. But it went wrong when everybody needed to be right, which is like a kind of core human like thing, to be right.
Mm-hmm.
Religion went wrong when every one of them decided that they had to be the correct religion and that nobody else could be. And that became what it's all about. Who's going to heaven and who's going to hell. And it's just another form of tribalism led by an absolute that I'm right, I believe in the right God, the true God, and you're wrong. Now, any form of absolute is incredibly dangerous, because if you really grasp onto the absolute, there is no discussion beyond it, right?
Yeah, there's no openness.
No.
Yeah.
If I believe that I'm doing God's will, there is not a human on earth that could convince me otherwise, because I believe that this is God's will and it's above everything. And I hear the same thing when some of our case studies, some of our clients come in and say things like that. I hear the same sort of like absolutism. I know it's wrong. I know it's unhealthy. I know it's abusive, but I'm going to make it work because that's what's right. If you convince yourself of that, there's nothing that you and I can say to be like, well, are you sure that's what's right? No, that's what's right. That's what God wants.
Yeah. And you're right. Like even though they're not saying God, or they're not promoting a religion, they're having this spiritual experience. That's how they're explaining it, and the conviction that they're showing.
It is, because you have to attach that conviction of because it's right to something, right? And it's either right because they believe that this is what society should be doing, or it's right because they believe that it comes from some sort of a higher power or higher purpose. Yeah. So it's one or the other. Either way, it's beyond them and it's beyond us, and it's dangerous and toxic. Like there is no place to go from that.
Yeah, but in relationships, that's a sign that your wounds are coming out and you need to resolve it, and it's not a spiritual experience.
Yeah. All right. So that's it for this episode. We hope you all have enjoyed. If you did, there are a number of ways that you can help us out. One is by sharing the podcast, the platform with your friends, subscribing, of course. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, everywhere podcasts are available. And the second and completely free way is to leave us a review. If you jump into the iTunes store and go to 12 Week Relationships, we'd love to read your review. If it's 5 stars or better, leave it. If it's less, maybe just send us critique via DM.
Yes.
And anyway, we appreciate all of you guys and all the amazing reviews that have been put up. It helps us a lot in growing the platform and sharing it. If anyone is looking for one-on-one coaching or online coaching, sign up for the wait list. The wait list is quite a ways out in terms of like one-on-one with Dr. Glenn, but we are going to be offering online group coaching soon, which is going to be an incredible program. And we'll be notifying everybody that's on that wait list first. So you can find it at 12weekrelationships.com. And that's it for me. You got anything else?
I think that's it.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Peace.